So the next is panel discussion from the Cisco team. I would like to call upon stage to join me, Brent King, Camille Harris-Prasad, and Valance Subban. If you could please join me on stage, please. Now, Brendan spoke about Cisco Merkle, right? So we've got Camille, who leads that business unit. The man is known to raise revenues by tenfolds. I heard he raised revenues from $4 million to $40 million, was it, Camille? And he's got international experience in Amsterdam and the EU and the UK. And he's joined by Brent. Brent is the senior key accounts manager. He's known for hunting down accounts. And just like Brendan, he also have an IT head. So again, sales and IT all put together in one head. We've got great lineup coming up. And finally, we've got Valance. And Valance is a regional manager for Cisco. Okay, to kick off, I'm going to start with you, Brent. To ask a question, yes. What are the key trends that Cisco predicts for retail in 2023 and beyond?
Thank you. So, I deal quite often with the retail sector based in Western Cape. And I think there's a multitude of trends, but I think there's a large focus today around the revamping of stores, the modernization of stores. And we're seeing a lot of these cutting-edge technologies that are starting to infiltrate themselves into the stores. Aside from that, I think, what's still a trend, and I think will always be a trend when it comes to retail, is low cost of store opening, simplicity of management of those stores. And, often when you talk to business, their deliverable is low cost of store opening. When you talk to IT operations, who's actually doing the physical work, they're also looking for simplicity in their management of the day-to-day operations. And that's truly where your high costs lies, not necessarily the cost of opening, but the cost of operating that store on a day-to-day basis. And, somewhere between business and operations, we're seeing that there's a disconnect where there's a lot of multi-vendor approach, saying that if we diversify our vendor offerings, it might become cheaper. From our perspective, from an operations perspective, we're seeing that it creates a lot of complexity. Brendan's touched on it in some instances where, you start introducing security risk, multiple skills across the different OEM brands, etc., which all adds up into more costs. So big part of our strategy in helping with customer trends is speaking to them about the simplicity of management, single platform, single view, and obviously security underpinning all of that. I'm just going to hand over to Camille. I don't know if you want to add in. I mean, we've had quite a few chats about it.
Yeah, sure. Welcome, everybody. Can everybody hear me good? So my name is Camille, as I've mentioned. I lead the Meraki business unit here in South Africa. And just to touch on Brent's point on the whole platform approach, right? Touching on the points that he mentioned in terms of store openings, in terms of getting customers in. If you look at it, you need a platform to actually enable this digitization, right? And what we have done at Cisco Meraki is we've built in this platform. And what this platform will enable you to do is bring in all of those aspects of your network, your core network that actually keeps things running in the store. But over on top of that is help provide insights in terms of what your customers are doing in the store. I mean, Brendan has showed you some interesting videos there in terms of Vienna and what they've done on top of our platform. But what do we do with all of that information? And when I speak to a lot of the executives in retailers, what I find is that there's a huge disconnect, right? The IT teams don't necessarily work or talk together with the marketing team, which don't work together, talk to the e-commerce team. And what we need to do is bring all of these teams together and speaking to each other, because at the end of it, this solid platform is the foundation that can provide you insights in terms of who's been visiting your store. So before I move on to Valance, I think that me as a consumer, if I think about the type of personalization that I would like, is that picture me sitting at home, I'm browsing, a catalog online, maybe at one of the big retailers. I've viewed certain things, right? I have the application on my phone. So the next time I go to the store, imagine if the access point recognizes, hey, this is Camille. We know he's been browsing XYZ products. Let me send him a greeting. Let me show him via wayfinding where he can find that aisle, for example, of the products he's been viewing. And it doesn't just stop there. What happens post-purchase, right? I can tie in that CRM system to the POS and basically have that omni-channel approach of communicating with that customer after they've left the store. And this is where it becomes very interesting, because it's cool to have data, but let's personalize it, right? Let's create profiles of people, meaning, hey, we know this person is a weekend visitor only. You as a retailer, what should you do to ensure that you get that person to come in during the week? Whether it's vouchers, whether it's discounts as such. So, yeah.
Before actually Valance go in, Brand, if I may just ask quickly, I'll give you a moment now, Brand. With that technology, what you're doing for the stores, if I'm a store now and I want to be ready for the future, I want to be future fit, how exactly does Cisco enable me through technology to do that?
Yeah, sure. Once again, through our open APIs and also this platform as it is. And it's funny, when I joined this business unit a few years ago, the one thing that stuck in my head, and I think it applies to quite a bit of things in Cisco, is that the technology or the platform is the worst it is the day you buy it. It being a cloud-enabled platform means that we are constantly adapting and changing it to our consumers' needs. I mean, we literally have a button at the bottom of the screen saying, give us your feedback. And all of this goes into a database, and we look at what are the top feedback we get from our customers, whether it's, hey, I would like a button, which you will see in our stand. I want a button that if I press it, I can call a smart attendant. Or, I want the camera to take a snapshot every time it identifies a person with a competitor bag in my store or something like that. So the platform, really.
Thank you. Brand,
Cool.
you
I
want to-
just want to add in there, and I think adding to what Camille said, the second biggest part to that is, the technology infrastructure, the physical tin that we are putting into stores is not just a means to an end anymore that enables you to have internet in and out of the store. That's almost your highway to traffic, and that's where your data sits, and that's how your data gets back into your campuses, and that's where your business outcomes are delivered. And the second to that on a trends base is obviously the omni-channel. We saw from a COVID perspective, I think there's not one person in this room that doesn't have one or two at least of the retailers, whether it's 6060 or the Pick and Pay app or any of those on their phones at the moment, or have used it. And omni-channel from a digital platform perspective, it's very important that retailers get it right quickly. I think, and again, I look at the audience and I say, if you've had a bad experience the very first time on an application, you probably tend to close it and you never go back there. You either delete it or it becomes stagnant. And that is a big focus for retailers, to make sure that the app is smooth, it's easy to use, it's light, and it talks to their needs. And I think Valance, from an AppD perspective, we've been engaged in quite a lot of conversations. If you just want to give your insights around application performance monitoring and the requirements for business.
Thanks, Brent. Yeah, so I think so in the world we're living in today, the pandemic has brought a lot where customers are now engaging digitally, especially in the retail space. E-commerce has started booming. And I guess, like Brendan said, we've just got one shot to get it right. Okay? The experience we delivered today, needs to be superb. Customers can't afford to have a bad digital or application experience. And as Cisco, I guess we believe that applications are now the business. It's the way each and every one of us engage today. Our experience, that's the currency we're trading with, right? Because if we have a bad experience, I'm not going to trade with that entity anymore. Like Brent said, I'm going to delete the application. And I guess the optimization part comes in where that brings in the profitability. So optimization, okay, and the application needs to drive that currency, right? And that will definitely bring in the profitability of a company. A lot of us can relate to stories. So I have a story, right? On the 25th of November last year, it was Black Friday. I placed an order with a massive, massive retailer in South Africa. And to date, I've not got my delivery, right? So I've been going back and forth fighting them. The online experience, the e-commerce platform was okay, not bad. There was a few glitches in terms of checkout, okay? But the digital moment I experience with them, has been crazy. So in retail, you are continuously creating digital moments with your customers. And these digital moments, they're going to remember, and that's how they're going to come back and engage with you. This is how you're going to drive more business, more profitability. And the digital moment or the experience did not just end when I checked out and I paid for my item. Okay? So when you download your application, Brent touched on it. It needs to be simple. It needs to be easy. I have my dad who's 84 years old ordering takeout, ordering his groceries. So it needs to be really simple, even for the older folk who's not tech savvy, right? But it's about how we monitor that application. Am I giving you a good experience? Is it seamless? Okay? The user will see it as simple, but guess what? Today, technology is driving that business. And in the back end, there is different platforms that's servicing this application. You have multi-cloud, right? You have on-prem, you have a hybrid, you have edge. And you need to have eyes from a IT perspective in the back of your head, right? And which a lot of entities don't. So you need to monitor this entire environment. We also need to monitor post your checkout. What's happening in the order management, okay? How do I get my delivery done? So the entity I was dealing with to today cannot find my order in their system. So I have the email, but they cannot. But if they were monitoring, if they had business insights, if technology and business were tied together and they were driven by KPIs, they would have noticed that, hey, we've got 10 orders in the system that's not been delivered for 2 months. So that's going to impact my bonus, okay? So it's also about driving insights into the application, okay? How do I get to root cause analysis within 5 minutes versus just blaming the network all the time, okay? And how do I get business insights? How do I take that data and transform it into actionable insights? Thanks.
Thank you. Actually, it's good to hear how Cisco is actually helping the retailers to deliver on high customer experience, good customer experience, and leading to customer satisfaction. I actually just want to know, as a follow-up from you, Brent, what are the key challenges that you possibly have found when you were working with your customers?
I think number one is the adoption of technology. And, again, I'm going to speak to cost again. We understand the retail market cost will forever be a factor. And, cheapest wins, and, sort of the same culture is taken into when making strategic investments in the infrastructure. And we often find that, if you buy low, it doesn't necessarily help you in the longer term. And I think I touched on it earlier when I said, you might buy low today, but what about your operational costs over the 3 or 5 or 7 period, 7-year period? Could be exorbitant, especially managing multiple technologies. Secondly is the adoption of the new and cutting edge technologies. I mean, we see it in the States and in Europe, and where they fast adopters, and they basically the innovators, where there's a slow adoption and a slow uptake on these sort of cutting edge technologies from the retailers. And then the disconnect between business and IT is often probably the biggest challenge, is what is IT able to deliver to business that business can do better, and vice versa. I think that's often where a lot of these great, and it's nice to see the pretty pictures and the videos, but a lot of these things somehow get stuck either going up into business or down into IT, where there's capability, there's budgets, there's understanding of what does this do for my business, is probably some of the biggest challenges we faced with. And like I said, just to reiterate, when making hardware procurement decisions, as an example for the stores, which is your network, it is actually driving analytics for you, for your customers. And if that message isn't sent all the way through, you then go into a price shootout just on hardware alone. And ultimately, everybody becomes a loser.
Speaking about challenges, let's talk about load shedding. Eskom. It's not Eskom, it's Eskom. We are now at stage 5 this morning in the news. They said stage 5. We've been in stage 6, stage 5. That means like 10 hours of no power in any given day. We're talking about digital. We're talking about apps. We're talking about stuff done online. When there's load shedding for those 10 hours in a day, my Wi-Fi is off if I don't have an inverter or generator. the networks are poor because the batteries run out. I mean, 10 hours is a long time. So, Camille, I'm going to come to you. With that now, the issues with power and stuff like that, right now, having smart and sustainable facilities is of top of mind now with load shedding and everything. So how exactly does Cisco help in that regard?
Yeah, sure. So first I'll start by speaking on a global perspective. And South Africa is really a unicorn if you think about it, because imagine trying to explain to the executives in the US that I haven't had power for the past 4 to 8 hours perhaps, and okay, can you not just go to a coffee shop? But okay, those coffee shops don't necessarily always have power as well because they also run on generators. So it's always a fun topic, but I can tell you one thing, our name is on a global stage now when it comes to presence. So sustainability as a whole, Cisco is taking it quite seriously in terms of having net zero carbon emissions by 2030. But what does it actually mean, right, in terms of the entire value chain of from where we procure our raw materials to the type of partners we use to actually distribute, manufacture, and put together our stuff, and then down straight to our consumers, right? And how we actually package the goods. And where I see this going on a retail perspective is that we've had to start building technologies that allow our customers, such as the retailers, to become more sustainable in terms of what they do. Load shedding is a big issue, as you've mentioned, right? So what we want to try and do is help retailers save a lot of money when it comes to spending budgets on energy. If I think about one thing, if you think about a retail store that is open from 7 a.m. to maybe 7 p.m., depending on what type of store it is, you have all of this high-powered equipment running, right? You have access points, you have printers, you have POS machines, right? The ones that accept your payments, they all plugged into the network. And every device that is plugged into a network with a physical cable is drawing power and drawing energy. Now, when the store closes at 7 p.m. and everybody goes home, why should those devices still be operating at full power, right? Why should those access points be providing wireless connectivity to nobody in the store, right? You might wonder. And Meraki has actually done a cost analysis abroad. It would be interesting to do it in South Africa that if you spend, for example, 8 hours of those devices running, your cost can be up to $30,000 overnight. But we have some features built into our hardware which allows you to actually say, cool, I'm setting a schedule that from 7 p.m. till 7 a.m. the next morning, I want all of these ports to power down so that any devices connected to those ports will automatically power down and use less electricity. When it comes to HVAC, heating, cooling, ventilation, we have sensors, smart sensors, which you can see in our booth next door, which allows you to measure air quality, measure how cold, how hot it is. So you can make smart decisions in terms of your produce. If you come from the Pick and Pays, the Checkers of the world when it comes to storage of these, so you make sure your wastage or your loss on those types of products is actually kept to a minimum. Because at the end of the day, that sort of wastage, you're going to have to get rid of it. And the methods in which you get rid of it is sometimes not always as sustainable. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. So I'll pause for a moment and open up for questions from the floor.
Hi everyone, my name is Miran and I'm from a company called Smart Sales, and I'm busy actually launching a new company called DigiPlat X, which is essentially driving business transformation through the power of platforms. So mine is not so much a question as it is an observation, right, and a comment. One of the things that I found fascinating about your particular system is that it's based on the following fact that businesses don't compete anymore. It's essentially ecosystems that compete. So I think that is something that needs to be driven quite seriously because people are literally resistant. And I have a strong sales background, and one thing I do agree with you is the disconnect between business and IT, right? So this is an interesting fact as well. They've found now in the buying cycle, guys in IT have become very, particularly millennials, right? They don't have that appetite for risk. So according to the latest statistics, they find that CEOs are getting far more involved in the actual purchasing decisions. So largely because they obviously can write the check, but more importantly, they understand the full dynamics, right? So this disconnect is not an easy breach to overcome. So, and the one thing that I found fascinating about your videos I know you speak to personalization, but actually it speaks more to hyper-personalization. And that is something that I think if we fully understand the capacity of this hyper-personalization, it will change the entire face. And companies that fall behind will essentially be wiped out. So I just want to compliment you on your system, and I think it was quite informative. Thanks a lot.
You know, I agree with you. You do see a lot of CEOs now getting directly involved in the tech and almost taking a top-down approach to saying, listen, I had a chat with a guy on an airplane. I like the concept of this. Please make it happen. And therein lies the disconnect, because IT might not have the capability. They might have a different strategy. They might have other priorities. I think there's no single retailer now that isn't prioritizing cloud as a journey. And when the CEO speaks, it often becomes a problem, right? You do it, and whether it's shelved in 6 months or it becomes a success, it's always those two sides of the coin. And secondly to that, we're also seeing business creating sort of, and I'm going to use the term loosely, these rogue units of specialists that are now going out and looking at tech. And we even seeing smaller tech companies that are becoming very successful very quickly because of the ability to respond to your customers' needs, to your point, hyper-personalization, to the end retailers themselves. So valid point, and you're 100% right.
So 100% to your point on the ecosystem part, right, and competing. I gave you my story about my experience about Black Friday, right? And today it's not delivered. That was a small ticket item, by the way. This week, I purchased a PS5. And guess what? I didn't even look at that vendor or that retailer when I was making my decision. I went onto a different platform, made the purchase. I'm not worried if that guy is a few hundred or thousand rand cheaper, because the experience, the ecosystem he provided was just atrocious. So yeah, to your point, 100% right.
I'm from Vodacom Business. I'm just keen to get your thoughts around, you know, in the context that we operate in South Africa, there's still a lot of people who are still doing the physical shopping, walking into the stores, etc., etc. What I'm trying to understand is, how do you bridge that divide between the physical experience and the online experience? And maybe the second part of my question is, from an omni-channel perspective, you know, I can interact with an organization at various parts, whether it's through the app, WhatsApp, etc., etc. How do you ensure that my footprint and the engagement with the organization remains consistent, whether it's in the physical aspect or even if I decide to transition into the digital space? Keen to get your thoughts on that.
Okay, so I'll go first on that. Great question, and I love having these types of conversations, especially when you're sitting with the execs from the retailers, because as you mentioned before, a lot of the high-level execs are now getting involved in making some decisions which used to sit maybe solely with marketing, solely with operations, solely with the IT team. And what I found is that when it comes to that continuous customer experience, we go back to that platform. You need that single, secure, connected platform that bridges across all of these. And if I have to think about it, and here's a tip for everybody, and which I've actually found out as well, if your department is struggling for budget, look at all of the different parts in which your business unit touches. So if you're in the marketing team, you rely on the sales, right? Operations, you rely on the IT as well. So the more we can interconnect these systems, the better we can create this experience. Specifically, how do we continue that experience? If you're a successful online shopper, right? What do I do further to get that online shopper more into my store? Because the probability of him buying more and more items is actually higher once we get him into the store, because we can create all these beautiful and brilliant experiences which we've showed you on video. So simple things such as, hey, now that when you do receive your PS5, I've actually sent you a 50 Rand voucher which you need to use in store, which is valid for 30 days. A simple idea which could generate millions of rands in terms of revenue depending on your reach, things like that. And I mean, that's not somewhere in a playbook. That's just me thinking as a consumer, sitting at home, wow, if I receive something like that, I think I would definitely go into store. Secondly, when you get that person into store, like I've mentioned in terms of that personalization or hyper-personalization, as the gentleman has mentioned, is that how do I continue that seamless online experience right to the point where I walk in, they know what I've been browsing. And look, many people might think, oh, I don't want to be tracked, I don't want to be, but when it really speaks to you and when it speaks to something you've been wanting or looking for, you kind of want that experience, right? And using things such as digital signage where you're walking past and you see, for example, oh, here's that food item that I've actually been wanting to look at the store. And then after I've made that purchase and when I went home, wow, it's been 5, maybe 7 days that I've never seen this shopper either come into store or log on to the platform. What notification do I push to him, either via email, either via maybe a telephone call, or maybe by a social media push? Because things such as Instagram, things such as Facebook, Twitter, they all have sponsored posts, right? And marketing agencies that are continuously using this in order to push out content. So that's how we continue that omnichannel approach.
Actually, I would like to cut it off now in the interest of time. I know this topic is so interesting. If we go on, we're never going to stop. So we'll catch up with our gentlemen during the break if we have any more questions as we need to move along. But thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and for the insightful conversation we had.
Thank you.